All right, today we're tackling a big one. Tipu Sultan. The 18th century ruler of Mysore. The thing is, when you hear his name, what comes to mind? Is it this brilliant freedom fighter, a visionary, or a brutal, ruthless tyrant? Let's get into it and see if we can figure it out.
So picture this. It's the late 1700s. The British East India Company is spreading its influence all over India. But in the south, there's this one guy who is their absolute worst nightmare. A ruler whose military skills and just sheer defiance earned him the nickname the Tiger of Mysore. And he had this famous saying, "It's better to live like a lion for a day than to live like a sheep for 100 years. And believe me, he wasn't just saying that for show. He lived by it.
But here's where it gets complicated. For every person who calls him a hero, there's someone else calling him a monster. You got tons of historical accounts that describe him as this incredibly cruel tyrant, a religious fanatic who persecuted countless people. So, how can both of these things be true? How do you square these two completely different images? Was he a freedom fighter, or was he, well, a monster?
Okay, so to really get a handle on who this guy was, we gotta go back, way back. You have to understand the world he was born into. This wasn't a time of peace and quiet, not at all. Tipu was basically forged in the fires of non-stop war. It's what turned him into such a formidable warrior right from the get-go.
So Tipu's childhood, it was something else. He wasn't just sitting in a classroom. His education was this crazy mix of books and battlefields. One minute, he's studying languages and religion, and the next, he's getting hands-on training in modern military tactics from French advisors. And we're not talking about textbook exercises here. Get this, at just 17 years old, he's already leading troops in a major war. And he's not just a soldier, his diplomatic skills were so good that he actually convinced a major ally of the British, the Nizam of Hyderabad, to switch sides. That's a power move that led to a massive, humiliating defeat for the British.
All right, fast forward to 1782. Tipu is now the Sultan, and his ambition? It was huge. It went way beyond just fighting wars and defending his borders. No, he had this grand vision. He wanted to build a truly modern state, a powerhouse that could compete with anyone on the world stage.
And check this out. This right here was his secret weapon, his absolute game changer, rockets. Now, other armies had rockets, sure, but they were pretty basic. Tipu's forces, though, they developed these incredible iron-cased missiles that could fly for up to 2 kilometers. Just try to imagine you're a British soldier at the Battle of Pollilore. Suddenly, the sky is filled with these screaming, fiery rockets raining down on you. They were so effective, they blew up the entire British gunpowder supply, leading to one of the worst defeats the British Empire ever faced in India. Absolutely devastating.
And he wasn't just a military guy either. Tipu was also a brilliant economist. He had this idea to import silkworms from China. A simple idea, right? Well, it completely transformed Mysore's economy. He basically created a world-class silk industry from scratch, turning Mysore into a global trade hub and making his kingdom incredibly rich.
Tipu was also smart enough to know that if you're going to take on a superpower like Britain, an empire built on sea power, you can't just fight on land. You need a navy. So he poured money into building modern ships. This wasn't just for protecting trade routes. It was about diplomacy. He wanted to build a network of allies, powerful players like the Ottoman Empire and, of course, France, who were just as wary of the British as he was.
Okay, this is where the story gets really mind-blowing. Tipu's rockets were so far ahead of their time that when the British finally defeated him, the first thing they did was snatch up his rocket designs. They studied them, copied them, and that technology, it went on to be used in the Napoleonic Wars. It literally laid the foundation for modern rocketry. Think about that. And centuries later, who do you think gives him credit? None other than India's own missile man, Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam. He called Tipu the first real innovator of the war rocket in the entire world. Wow.
But for all that genius, for all that innovation, there is another chapter to Tipu's story, a much, much darker one. And the really chilling part? A lot of the evidence comes directly from him, from his own letters and his own official records. And they don't paint the picture of a visionary leader. They paint the picture of a tyrant.
Just look at the inscription on his sword. It says, "My victorious sword is a lightning strike for the infidels." To his critics, that's not just some poetic flourish. That is a mission statement. It's a declaration of a religious fanatic on a holy war against anyone who wasn't a Muslim. And they argue it was a mission he carried out with absolute brutality.
And this, right here, is the central puzzle of Tipu Sultan. It's so confusing. Because on the one hand, you have records of him being a patron to Hindu temples, giving them land, giving them expensive gifts. But on the other hand, you have all this evidence of brutal religious persecution. So what was it? Were his actions just political, a way to crush rebellions in certain areas? Or was it straight up religious hatred? People are still arguing about this today.
The accounts from that time are just horrifying. They talk about incredible brutality. For example, in just one region, Kodagu, it's alleged that as many as 40,000 non-Muslims were killed on his direct orders. 40,000. In other places like Malabar and Mangalore, thousands upon thousands more were apparently forced to convert. These stories have, understandably, left a massive stain on his reputation that you just can't ignore.
So you can see how this was all building to a climax. Tipu's relentless fight against the British, combined with the fact that he was cozying up with their #1 enemy, France, well, it made him a problem the British had to solve. And so the stage was set for one last epic showdown, the Fourth Anglo-Mysore War. This time, the British weren't messing around. They were coming to finish him off for good.
But in the end, it wasn't just the might of the British army that brought Tipu down. It was betrayal, a knife in the back from one of his own. His own minister, a guy named Mir Sadiq, made a secret deal with the enemy. Can you believe it? At the most critical moment, he deliberately moved his soldiers away from a key part of the fort's wall, basically opening a door and inviting the British army to walk right in.
So, the walls are breached. And where's Tipu? He's having lunch. As soon as he hears the news, he doesn't even think twice. He literally drops his food, gets on his horse, and charges straight into the heart of the battle. He gets shot, wounded again and again, but he just keeps fighting, like a cornered tiger. He fought until the very end, when a final shot brought him down.
The British offered him a way out. They told him he could surrender, live on as a puppet ruler. But he refused. Remember what he said about living like a lion versus a sheep? He meant it. He chose to die a warrior on the battlefield, rather than live a life on his knees. And in that moment, he cemented his legend as this ultimate symbol of defiance against foreign rule.
And just like that, the Tiger of Mysore was gone. With his death, the last real roadblock to total British control in South India was removed. The British had won the war, sure, but the fight over Tipu Sultan's legacy, that was just getting started.
So, here we are, left with these two completely different stories that just don't seem to fit together. On one side, you've got the hero, the patriot, the innovator, the guy who never gave up fighting for freedom. And on the other side, you've got the villain, the cruel tyrant, the religious bigot, the ruler whose own brutality might have led to his downfall. And the craziest part? There's historical evidence that backs up both sides of the story.
The truth is, history is messy. It doesn't really do simple heroes and clear-cut villains. Tipu Sultan was absolutely a product of his brutal, violent era. He was a visionary and a conqueror, a symbol of resistance, and a man responsible for terrible acts. In a way, he's like a mirror. Looking at him forces us to confront our own ideas about patriotism, religion, and what it means to be a leader. So maybe the real question isn't just who was Tipu Sultan, but rather, how do we today choose to remember a figure this complex? What's your take on it?